America Weekend.
This is America Weekend. I'm Mike Bennett. One of our regular contributors here on America Weekend is gardening and nature expert Greg Quinn, who this week takes a closer look at owls.
Hi, I'm Greg Quinn, and welcome to this week's edition of Notes from the Currant Farm. Like many, Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. In my case, it probably has a lot to do with being so close to the land and having a holiday that coincides with the end of the growing season here on the Currant Farm. As I reflect on the season past, I always relish the celebration, in good years and bad. And I always thankful for whatever bounty is yielded by the collaboration between the land, the weather, and me. Of course, the feast, the family, and the friends are all wonderful, but my favorite moments are at the end of the day when the farm is quiet once again, and I take my annual Thanksgiving walk outside just to be still for a while. I crossed the lane in front of the old farmhouse and strolled up the field past the dried brown seed pods that only 3 months ago were brightly colored wildflowers that fed my honeybees. Thanksgiving night this year was clear and cold, and I found myself an audience of one for billions of stars performing the same tremulous dance that they've performed for billions of years. Nothing compares to being under a star-filled sky in an open field on a crisp, clear winter's night in the country. After several moments of peaceful solitude, the silence was perforated by the plaintive hoots of a great horned owl from the woods at the top of the field. He was making his evening announcement. "This is where I'll be hunting my Thanksgiving feast tonight. Friends and relatives not invited." Now, there are two distinct species of owls in the world, the barn owl, which is comprised of about 20 subspecies, and true owls, which is a group of about 190. Now, normally, 8 different owls can be found here on the Currant Farm at one time or another, and last year, because of the now famous polar vortex, we were visited by a snowy owl far from her normal Arctic habitat. Not all owls hoot. Hisses, screeches, beeps, and clacks are just a few of the calls that different owls make. And many have different calls for different communications, such as territory, food, and breeding. They're generally solitary birds, but for you crossword buffs out there, on rare occasions when there are several together, they're called a parliament of owls. They are also generally quiet birds. Their calls are usually only to announce their presence in a breeding area, or in the case of my friend tonight, "This is my hunting area, stay away." Many birds of prey rely heavily on their sight to locate their prey. Like primates, owls have binocular vision, enabling them to pinpoint the prey. But unlike primates, they can't move their eyes, and so they move their heads instead. And many owls can twist their heads more than 270 degrees. But it's their hearing that's truly extraordinary. This incredible ability is the result of their unusual ear placement. You see, while the ears of most animals are symmetrically positioned on the head, the ears of owls are asymmetrical. That is, one ear is actually lower than the other. Faint sounds, such as a mouse scurrying beneath the leaves on the forest floor, reaches each of the ears differently, and the owl is able to accurately detect the exact location of the mouse from up to 60 feet away. The feathers around the owl's eyes, called facial discs, also aid in hearing by actually directing the sound to its ear canals, not unlike satellite dishes. Another feature, which makes the owl an excellent hunter, are soft, downy serrations on the tips of the wings, which reduce turbulence and completely muffle the sound of their wing beats, allowing them to swoop down on prey in absolute silence. I remember one autumn afternoon a few years back, as I was strolling through a patch of open hardwood, an enormous great horned owl with a wingspan of about 5 feet flew past me from behind. I didn't hear a thing until it entered my peripheral vision only a few feet away from my head. I'm pretty sure I lost 1 or 2 years of life at that moment. Farmers love having owls around. I've erected a couple of tall owl boxes to attract these wonderful flying mousetraps. A single barn owl can consume as many as 800 rodents a year. Many owls, including the great horned, mate for life, although they spend very little time together except during breeding season. The rest of the year, they'll often occupy adjacent hunting zones. This amazing bird can live up to 13 years in the wild, and on this evening of thanks, I'm really thankful they share the Currant farm with us. The owl has grown silent, and my attention is once again drawn up into the frozen crystal universe above. I've experienced this glittering miracle thousands of times, and yet it's always as if I'm seeing it for the first time. The beginnings and ends of the seasons are not dictated by the Julian calendar for farmers. In my calendar, the night of Thanksgiving is the sweet end of autumn and the beginning of the quiet season that is winter here on the Currant farm. Standing alone in the sleeping wildflower field, I embrace the still cold, and it embraces me. The only movement is the twinkling of the silent stars. For a copy of this week's edition, information about the Currant farm, and the story of why currants were illegal to grow in the U.S. for 100 years, go to currants.com. Happy Thanksgiving from the Currant farm.
That's gardening and nature expert Greg Quinn. I'm Mike Bennett, and you're listening to America Weekend.